So this is the pilot episode of our podcast that doesn't yet have a name. Charlie and I are both international tour guides for a company called Tropical Birding. We started out as work colleagues and then slowly and reluctantly became friends, I think. We realized that we probably share more things in terms of our lifestyle and interests than just about anybody else we know, because we have a fairly unusual lifestyle of traipsing around the world and chasing rare birds and guiding people. And we realized we have a lot of good stories that don't come out too often, except maybe over some sparkling water during a tour from time to time. So we thought it might be fun to publicize some of these, do a little podcast to talk about some of our adventures. So for our pilot episode, Charlie has assembled a list of his top 10 lifetime bird sightings, which is pretty epic considering how many birds you've seen.
Yeah, I was actually hoping to get to 7,000 species this year, but COVID sort of got in the way, unfortunately. So I'm sort of stuck on about 6,900.
This is a pretty gripping list to me, Charlie, because I've only
I know.
I think three out of your top 10. So this is going to be pretty painful for me.
I was pretty aware when I was putting the list together that you haven't seen a lot of them, and you probably would quite like to see them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, some pretty mega birds here.
It's funny. It's funny how guides are always very aware what other guides have not seen.
Absolutely, we love to grip each other off.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to do this in sort of suspense building ESPN style. We're going to start with number 10 and work our way up to number 1. So we'll see how far we get today. What do we have, 40 minutes? So your number 10 top lifetime bird sighting was blue-throated macaw in Bolivia.
Yeah. I don't know how much you know about this bird, but it's a critically endangered.
I've actually seen this one, so.
Oh, you were in Bolivia. Did you get to see? Yeah. You got there, really? Because it's quite
It's the absolute middle of nowhere.
Yep.
I spent about 7 months in Bolivia.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd been to the Beni though.
Yep. You worked there though, right? Or we'll tell the story.
Okay, so it goes a little bit of background. I did a big. This was before I became a guide. I did a big expedition around Latin America for over 2 years, looking for endangered species. And during that time, I had the opportunity to volunteer on a conservation program, which was by the World Parrot Trust, funded by the World Parrot Trust. And this was sort of studying blue-throated macaws, protecting nests in a lot of different ways. So I applied for it and I got it. And I was already mid-trip through South America, and it was sort of on my way. So I sort of took a pause in my traveling, and I joined this group of misfits and weirdos that were all stupid enough to go into the middle of nowhere in Bolivia. So the province, I think they're called provinces in Bolivia, is called the Beni, El Beni. The capital is Trinidad, or Trini, as everybody called it. Trini. And there's actually a soft drink that people drink there. It's just really sweet stuff, and it's called Trini as well. Trini. Anyway, so I spent close on 5 months in the Beni, and just to kind of give you an idea of what it's like, a lot of people might have been to Pantanal. So the Beni. It's like the Llanos from Venezuela and from Colombia, and the Pantanal from Brazil. It's like a big seasonally flooded grassland.
It's actually connected with the Pantanal, right?
It's directly connected.
Essentially.
Yeah, the whole thing.
It's the same ecosystem.
Yeah, and the whole surrounding the Amazon rainforest is this kind of area of mosaic of flooded grasslands and little islands of forest. So that's the kind of area that it was in, but not to go into too much detail. But anyway, it was my whole trip around South America was to look for threatened species, endangered species. So I had a chance to go and spend some good time with a critically endangered species. And I was working under the coordinator, who was a guy called Toa. who became a good friend of mine. Funny as hell. And but it was a killer combination. We got on like a house on fire and we became really good friends. Anyway, so we ended up in Trini, and the time I spent there was sort of sandwiched between the dry season and the rainy season. I was just there at the sort of at the changeover. And in the dry season, the way we went around studying these birds was on dirt bikes, and you can imagine tearing around on these Bolivian cattle ranches on dirt bikes, like birding and climbing trees and photographing birds. I mean, it was amazing. And that whole suite of birds there, it's absolutely full of birds. I mean, I don't know how many, I probably saw maybe 300 species of birds there. Really, you got such a variety of habitats and wetlands and forests and grasslands and everything in between. So it was a really amazing time and exciting, and really, it was really cool. And I actually remember the first time I saw these things, because they kind of look like a blue and yellow macaw, which is a lot more widespread, but these have got this sort of blue throat, a little bit smaller. And you could track these birds. They ate these little palm fruits, and they were specializing on those. The blue and gold macaws, the blue and yellow macaws, they sort of float around and eat all sorts of different things. These blue-throated macaws, they eat this one type of palm seed, and they eat it really cleanly. They sort of hold it with their bill and they scrape on the lower mandible like that. And then so you could go around under palm trees checking all these little fruits to check the little scrape markings on there. It was really cool. And then one day we hear this call and we kind of track these birds, and then I get my first view of this critically endangered species. It was like really, difficult to see. I don't know what your story was to get there, but it's a very inaccessible place. Most of them are on private land, so they're not easy birds to find. But it was just an amazing experience and just a fun time. A fun group of people, and just doing a lot of fun stuff, climbing trees, watching birds, taking notes. We even had little slingshots, because one of the biggest reasons for these having nest failures was toucans eating the nests and the chicks. So I would be sort of sitting in this little blind with my slingshot with like a little clay ball, so it wouldn't kill the toucans, but it would scare them enough to drive them away. And you'd be in there, and then the toucan would sort of come and try and steal the eggs, and you'd shoot out and start firing the slingshot at this thing. So yeah, it was a fun experience and a cool bird. And anyway, so that's my number 10.
Very direct conservation action there.
It was. I felt like I was doing my bit. I was passionate about endangered species, and I felt it was just nice to do a little bit towards that. Yeah.
It's probably pretty unknown in those days. I mean, I went in early 2000s, and not many people had been out there, although there was an ongoing project, which I guess was the same one that you were part of.
Well, there was actually two projects going on. Yeah.
Okay. Pretty remote, and I think it still is.
Yeah.
So I know this is your top 10, but I'll just tell you a couple things about my searching for blue-throated macaws.
I'd love to hear, yeah.
I was only there for maybe 3 nights in Trini. And it makes me wonder how you survived 3 months in that place, because it's a hole. But of course, it's a wonderfully birdy place. But I remember it was so hot. There was a generator in Trini, and it died at like 10 p.m. You can kind of fall asleep, and then you basically wake up just in a pool of sweat when the generator goes off and the whole town's electricity is cut. And I just remember lying on the concrete floor to try to get a little bit cool in order to be able to sleep for a couple hours in the coolest part of the night. I mean, it's a hot, sweaty place.
For fun, back in my single days, we used to motorcycle around the plaza. There's like a square, and you'd sort of go round and round like 20 times. And if some pretty young ladies were also sort of on a motorbike, you'd say, hola, hola, and you'd sort of that was about the only thing. That was about the only thing you could do in Trini, apart from sweating and get bitten by mosquitoes and get
right around the plaza.
Get dengue
Drink
fever.
a Trini.
And Trini, yeah. I'll tell you one. Just when I was diagnosed with dengue fever, the way I before I got taken to the doctor, I drank some trini, and that's the last thing I remembered. I think it just my blood sugar shot up so much, and I ended up sort of collapsing, like fainting in this sort of drink with this sort of sickly sweet taste. Anyway, amazing place, amazing experience.
It was a sign that you needed to follow the monk life,
the monkish life.
No more trini.
Yeah.
So you were going around on motorcycles. I went to see the birds on horseback, which was actually incredibly cool as well. So you're going through these like massive haciendas on horse, which is a really cool way to bird. And then they nest in palms, right?
They do,
like in little groves.
Usually, the palms are actually the easiest place. They're quite soft to hollow out, but they've got better breathing success in bigger trees. But now the horseback, I didn't. So I said in the dry season I was on dirt bikes. And then the rainy season came and you couldn't do anything on dirt bikes. You were on horseback, yeah. So I had that same experience. And it's cool.
It's really cool. And it's such a remote place. And there's people back on these haciendas who've been there. Well, let's put it this way. You feel like some Nazis might still be hiding out in that area of Bolivia.
You know what?
Like
can I tell you a little story?
Yeah.
So we were at one of the more remote ones. So I probably went to 7 or 8 different places. I mean, there's probably only 200 of these birds in the world. I saw about 50 of them. I was taking photos of their feathers on their faces because it's like a fingerprint. You could tell each one. So I was doing a little photo fit thing. But there was one really remote place we had to fly into. So we had to sort of hire a little Cessna aircraft. And I guess it used to be a place where cocaine was sort of flown in and out of. And I think sort of 20 years ago, a lot of the cattle ranches were used to sort of as little stopover points for aircraft full of cocaine. So it's got that feeling about it, really edgy.
Oh yeah, dodgy, kind of like you go there when you want to hide from the world and be totally anonymous.
Oh, and one more thing that my wife reminded me of today was that when I left there, I spoke Spanish like a Bolivian cowboy. It was this filthy Spanish, and I got into the habit of kind of chewing coca leaves with a little bit of bicarb. And on my horse, I was like a real cowboy.
Okay, we need a little example of filthy Bolivian cowboy speech. Awesome. All right, next on the list, up to number 9, and this is one that we actually saw together. It's the only one on the list that we shared. This is Udzungwa Forest Partridge in the Udzungwa Mountains of central Tanzania.
You might want to, you probably remember the details of how this bird was discovered and stuff a little better than me, mate. Do you want to give a little bit of background on this bird, Ken?
I don't want to misspeak, but the story is that basically some people were researching in the Udzungwas. I know that Udzungwas were biologically really poorly known, like up until the 70s and 80s. They hadn't been surveyed much, and there were some researchers, I guess they were bird researchers, or maybe they were mammal researchers there.
There was one dude, I don't know if he was there in that original group, but there's a guy called John Fielzer who's just a legend in, and I think he had something to do with the discovery or describing the bird. But yeah, I'm not sure who they were. But anyway, sorry, go on.
No, I think we're a little bit hazy on the details, but there was scientists, researchers there, and they basically ended up eating a stew that was cooked by their camp helpers, and they pulled a leg out of it, and they looked at the morphology of this leg, and they said, this isn't an African bird. It had the kind of the spurs or the structure of an Asian partridge rather than an African bird, which led them to talk to local folks about this bird and find the bird and describe it to science quite recently.
What was it now?
That's what I remember.
Yeah, no, that's about the details that I have. Was it around 2000 or before that? It was recent.
I think it might have been late 90s.
Right. Yeah.
It was sort of 20 years ago.
But anyway, so Ken and I had this tour through Tanzania with some favorite folks of ours, and we thought, why don't we go and bird the mountains, the Eastern Arc Mountains. Not just the Eastern Arc Mountains, but the really remote ones that we haven't been to before. The Ulugurus and the Udzungwas. And we put together this trip just ahead. Was it just ahead of the thing? It was, wasn't it? It was before the trip. And this is one of the birds that we really wanted to do. And we got in touch with a local guy who was a friend of ours. And he sort of got some of the permits and stuff required. And he got us to the sites. And he was a super nice dude, but he was a little bit chubby. He was a chubby little and he wasn't quite as fit as we were, being sort of tall, lanky, long-legged.
Who loved to walk.
Who loved to walk, yeah. And he was always getting left behind a little bit. No, what are we talking about? This was after we left the dude, eh?
Right, he had to split for another trip, and so we ended up with these with this incredibly dodgy vehicle and horrible driver.
Oh yeah.
And but then we were up there with the guy with
the one-armed dude. Yeah, we were given a guide. I think they wanted to send us up with guides and porters, and we were like, no, this one guy that knows the way, that's it. And they said, okay, well, this guy knows the way, and they pull out this dude, and he's got one arm. Do you even remember the guy's name?
Man, I should remember. But
he was a legend. He was an absolute legend. This guy. He was he was more useful with one arm than most people are with two. I'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
And he could build a fire better than we could with one arm.
With one arm. You remember he lost that arm to poachers. He was patrolling the forest and he got attacked by poachers and they basically slashed his arm off with a machete or something. That was pretty crazy.
And he always had a smile on his face. And he was just a nice dude. I mean, we didn't really want to go with anyone. I mean, we're sort of not that social at the best of times anyway. But yeah, we basically had to take someone, and we took this guy, and we couldn't have taken anyone better. He was just amazing. And he would help us make the fire, and he would very. Did he eat some of our amazing food that we made there?
He did. I think
the spicy bean pot.
Mm.
Anyway, a lot of details. I actually think this a story of this trip would probably fill a whole podcast. But and so we had this partridge that we want to see amongst a lot of other very cool birds, and we basically left the dude. He said, "There's a trail," and we just shut up this trail. We were walking over buffalo dung. You know, we were in the middle of nowhere. There's elephants, there's buffaloes, there's all sorts of stuff, dangerous animals there. And it was just exciting and just front line. It was a killer hike to get in there. We had to all our own stuff, probably like 50 pounds of stuff, food, tents, and then probably it was maybe a 6-7 mile hike, something like that. I can't quite remember how, but it was about 7 miles. Yeah, up and down and up and down and up and down, and it was just a killer. We just arrived there just sweating and this cool little, just a flat piece of grass next to a little stream at the beginning of this trail where we could go and search for this bird. And we didn't, I don't think I managed to get a recording of this thing before we got up there, but we basically sort of went up and down a few times, and we had these things kind of running across the trail, and we were sort of running after them through the forest and the bamboo forest and
just bushwhacking, just diving into the bamboo, and
it was just the kind of birding that I like best, and I think you probably do as well.
Yep.
And not the kind of stuff that we often get to do with clients as well. It was, even for very fit people, it was pretty grueling trip. And
legitimately, there's some risk. I mean, when you're on a slope that's like 40 degrees, and there's
dangerous animals, poachers.
There's buffalo, elephant, poachers, right?
A lot of the places we went on that trip, we would always turn to each other and say, I really would not like to bring clients here. I was like, it's amazing being here, but you wouldn't want the responsibility, and you just feel bad about putting people through that amount of discomfort and just grueling.
Yeah, you'd love to show people the birds, but man, the just how grueling it is, and just the risk entailed is the big thing.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's my number 9, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
We were there.
You remember that so it was like 7 miles into the camp, and then up to where you see the partridge.
Oh,
It was an absolutely
miles.
brutal hike. I mean,
scrambling.
it was like maybe 3 miles in a line and a 1 mile up. I mean, the parts of the trail were like almost
slippery,
straight up,
muddy. And I don't know how many times we did it. I mean, it was like it was several times a day that we were going up and down.
Yeah, we did it multiple times a day. Yep.
Yeah. But
yep, I was pretty good by the end of it.
We were, yeah, we were. Cool. That's my number 9.
All right, so I'm looking at the list. Yeah, number 8. Ooh, this is a pretty painful, gripping one for me.
Yeah.
Maybe the world's coolest hummingbird, marvelous spatula tail from Peru.
Yeah.
Never seen it.
It's an awesome bird. It's on the northern Peru birding circuit. This was so after the Bolivian thing that I did with the macaws. I moved on through the rest of Bolivia and then up into Peru, and I ended up spending, I think, 6 months at least in Peru birding. I sort of came in and out a few times, but I really birded the whole country really hard. And it was before the days, I mean, we're talking probably maybe 12 years ago, no more, maybe 15 years ago. So, there was a few intrepid birders, and birders went there, but in certain places where there was hotels and whatever. But there were some amazing routes that there just wasn't anywhere to stay. And one of them was this northern birding route. Now,
no lodges or hotels or towns nearby or anything.
Yeah, now there's a really nice birding lodge up there. Did they call it the long-whiskered owlet lodge or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Abra Patricia. And there was a lot of cool birds. There was this long-whiskered owlet, which at the time had only been rediscovered and seen once, I think. It was, after I was there, it was seen several years later, and they found it quite close and people started seeing it. But it was a bird that at the time people just knew nothing about or where it was. But at least the marvelous spatule tail was quite accessible. And a guy called Thomas Valky had just written a birding sight guide to Peru. And it was just an incredible resource for birding the country. But it told you how to get there, where to stop, go how many kilometers along and stop and climb that thing. So there was a lot of good, for the first time, really good detailed information on how to see a lot of the endemics. But I think he made a comment in that about this northern birding route, that there was a little village and there was somebody in the village that if you found him, he would sort of let you sleep in his barn or something like that. Or, you could, there was a little shack that you could sleep on the table or on the mud floor or something like that. So we found this dude, and he was like, yeah, sure. And then he had this little shack that he let us sleep in. I actually pitched the tent inside and we had a little mattress. But again, it wasn't, this was birding, hitchhiking, walking around. There was no drivers and no local guides and stuff. This was all backpacking. This was back in my birding bum days, they're almost on a $10 a day budget or whatever, you'd pay. You'd be camping and just eating in some cheap little restaurants, whatever. But there was this information on where you could see these birds in this new book. So I got to these spots, and I think even maybe described what kind of flowers. So maybe little pink flowers, whatever. So I was moving around here, and then I eventually found this male and got some photos, and it was amazing. And I actually saw a male doing his display, which at the time was not well known. I don't think there was any video of it. And I actually got a video of this thing displaying. And it's quite a small little hummingbird like this. It's got like a little blue thing here, and it's kind of green and black. But it's just ridiculous long tail streamers, these wires. And on the end is this big spatule. And they could actually sort of bend these around on top of their heads. And then they would sort of hover and they would sort of float up and down in front of the female, like inside a bush. So I was there with my little camera trying to video this beautiful thing that went sort of up and down, and it was mind-blowing.
So The spatulas were kind of moving
around. They would put them up over the top of the bird, so they'd be sort of hovering above, like the sort of standard wing.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. And just a real privilege. I met a guy there. It was nice going through Peru because you would sort of meet a biologist and chat with them and then say where you were going next. And they'd say, oh, I've got a friend up there. And then they put me in touch with this local guy called Santos, I think he was called. He's now a sort of guide, really nice little guy. And I met up with him. And it was just a wonderful experience. It was just sort of that feeling of just exploration and just sort of pushing frontiers and just getting somewhere really amazing. And I often think something that always goes through my head when I'm seeing a really rare bird is I am probably the only person in the world looking at this bird right now. And you look at people. Have you ever thought that? Has that gone through your mind?
No, never exactly that. I've thought I'm one of the few people in the world who's seen this, but I've never thought that about one moment in time.
Oh, there's a little fella. But yeah, that often went through my mind when I was seeing these very rare birds that I am almost certainly the only person looking at this bird right now in the world. And it just gives me a real sense of privilege. And that was really a very special bird. And I'll tell you a little story about it, which is quite kind of sad and interesting at the same time. I was told that the local people, when going through Peru, you'll often see little boys with slingshots. And I feel a bit of a hypocrite now that I've told you I was using a slingshot on toucans, but I wasn't trying to kill them, just scare them away. But these boys are always doing a little target practice, trying to kill little birds. And there was a story about this being such a beautiful hummingbird that if you killed one of these birds and you chopped it open and you took its heart out, you could make a little potion or something like that. And then it would be like a love potion. You could give it to a girl and she would fall in love with you. And I don't know if this was a sort of old wives' tale or what, but it was just very sad, Well, obviously the people, they see that it's such a beautiful thing, which is nice. They sort of appreciate the beauty, but then coming along and killing it and then doing that thing. So that was quite a sad story. Huh. But it's nice to hear some positive things because it's all doom and gloom in bird conservation world. Birds are always on the edge of extinction and everything's, going to shit, But with a backtracking a little bit to the blue-throated macaw, they subsequently found a decent-sized population and they made a reserve, a blue-throated macaw reserve. And they also did that. Yeah. And they also did this. I think the World Parrot Trust were involved and Armenia were involved and a few different groups. And it's just nice to hear a bit of good news. But with this marvelous spatule tail, they set up a reserve there and a little conservation center, which was managed by this little local kid, Santos that I met. He became the local guide and the guardian of these birds. So it's nice to see rare birds and hear about their conservation issues, and then subsequently hear some good news about that they're doing better now.
Yeah. Do they come to feeders these days?
Well, at this new center that they made, they set up some feeders. They planted bushes of the flowers that they liked, and they also set up some feeders. So now when you go there, you just drive. It's fairly close to the road. You just drive off, go to the feeders. It's a very simple thing to do now, but back in the day, it wasn't.
Yeah, a bit different. All right, so we're up to number 7. This is especially gripping for me because I've not seen this bird, but I've heard its bill snaps. These ground cuckoos, they follow ant swarms, and when I guess they bill snap just to communicate with each other. So I've actually heard this kind of from this bird a couple times, never laid on.
So there's 5 species of South American ground cuckoos. They're called neomorphous. And they are really some of the hardest birds on the continent to see. Yep. And they're almost, it was always bragging rights, especially like birders or guides in South America. It was like, oh, you seen the ground cuckoo? Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I saw the banded ground cuckoo. And when I was in Ecuador at the time, that was it. That was how you sort of told the men from the boys kind of thing, Yeah, even some really famous birders had not seen this banded ground cuckoo, which was even at the time like one of the most difficult of this group of 5 impossible birds. So did you see any of them in other places?
I've seen, I guess it's rufous vented in eastern Ecuador, which was pretty crazy, lucky. Like the first day I ever spent in the Ecuadorian Amazon, I saw a rufous vented ground cuckoo. That's the only one I've ever seen.
Yeah, I had one. I had one on the Pipeline Road in Panama, which is supposed to be one of the best places. But yeah, anyway, they had this sort of mythical status, and later on, they actually managed to tame one or get it sort of habituated to come into feeding. This was a while later. There was a place called Poco de Choco, I think, and they had this ground cuckoo, and everybody, once it was being seen, everybody just went and twitched it because it used to come out every day.
People flew from the United States and from Europe, and I mean, it was like probably one of the biggest global twitches in the history of birding.
Really serious birders. It was pretty mad. And I was anyway. So this is before then. This is when it was still a near mythical species. And I was guiding a really experienced couple from Tennessee. I might not name them by name, but a really cool couple. They're actually one of the top listing couples in the world. I think they're well over 8,000 species, which probably gives the game away. But really nice couple. And we were sort of going through, it was like a cleanup tour for Ecuador. So we were sort of doing some different sites, trying to get them a few lifers. And we weren't expecting to get this. We were at Canande, which is a really fantastic Hokotoka reserve, just sort of foothills of western Ecuador. Did you ever get there, Canande?
I've been there. Yep.
Yeah, a really cool place, really nice reserve, fantastic birding, but quite some hiking. And there was a high part of this reserve. And it was quite a tough hike. It was about a 30-40 minute, quite steep climb to get to this ridge. And we were actually going up there to look for this other cool bird called the golden-chested tanager, which is one of these big Banksia, chunky tanagers. And we got really good views and photos and everything like that. And we came across this ant swarm. And then, ant swarms are always fun. They're some of the most fun you can have birding in Latin America. You get really close to, but the birds just seem to lose their fear of you, and you could just get closer and closer. And it's just how close you can get without getting ants all over yourself,
Exactly.
And they would normally come in stream, so you'd sort of be looking down, step forward, looking down, step forward. And you think, oh, I'm here, okay. And you'd spend a bit of time watching, and then the ants, of course, would move, and you'd look down, and you were covered with ants again. But you'd be all these ant birds sort of hopping around. So we were happily birding this ant swarm up on the ridge at Canande. And there was ocellated antbird and bicolored antbird, and then a bunch of other stuff, wood creepers and things like that. And we were standing quite still. And then we saw this movement, and we're just because they're pretty experienced birders, they're not going to shout out. They're kind of pointing and just quiet and just look over there. We were looking around. I think there was maybe 4 of us. And then we saw this thing, this massive bird. And for such a huge, it's like a pheasant. It's like a sort of ringneck pheasant size bird that's almost impossible to see in the forest. It's a big chunky thing. And we saw it, and we got great views. And then this guy that I was guiding, he was a real whiz with digiscoping, and he managed to digiscope this thing like a banded ground. I don't know how many people have done that. Probably not that many. But he digiscoped this banded ground cuckoo. And there's a little bit of footage on the YouTube channel that I've got going. I don't know if you've seen them on there. But the interesting thing was, he may have been the #1 lister at the time, a guy that's recently passed away, I think, John Hornbuckle. He was there. And there was another really top world lister, this guy, Mark Zambiers, and he was there. And my little group that I was guiding, we sort of saw this bird, and the others were like, oh, and they kept going back to the same place, but, spending, 2 or 3 days.
They never saw it.
And no one else saw this thing, so we were really, and they were, really good birders. So we were very lucky. And again, it was a big privilege to see this really mega bird. And of course, it was bragging rights after that. to all the
Big
other guys.
time.
It's like, yeah, I've seen banded ground cuckoo. Yeah.
That was the day you joined the club.
Oh
Um,
yeah. And it's always been
do
my
you think-
dream to get all 5. I've got 2 now, and I'd love to see all
Oof.
5. And I know other people that have seen these other ones, but it would be that would be a big. That's like seeing all the fluff tails in the world. It's like a big bragging rights.
Now, do you think the people who saw that bird prior to the Poco de Choco thing, did they all see it at ant swarms like you did?
There's a
Or did
few
some
stories
people
about
just-
it. Apparently they follow peccaries as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's like the born ground cuckoo. They follow bearded pigs around.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing. They're sort of digging up the ground and they're just sort of following on nearby. And also, a friend of mine knew quite a lot about them, and he said they would often hang around these small ants that weren't sort of the army ants, but they were in little lines. So I think they followed ants away from the obligate ant birds as well. So, but I mean, there's very little known. It's all just an anecdotal thing. A friend of mine, he was walking along, and there was one lying on the trail sunbathing like that, just in the middle of on a little bit of light. So you always needed to be able to. I heard the click once. There's a guy called Niels Krabbe who's like another Danish legend in the ornithological world, but I think he got a recording of its click. And the way he did it, he knew where a reserve where it was often seen, and he walked along 50 yards and he did this, and then he turned his microphone on, waited a few minutes, and then sort of walked along and did this again. And he just did that all day long.
That's dedication. That's serious recordist dedication right there.
Yeah. But Megabird. I think we've got time for another one, do you think?
Yeah, so we've done 4, maybe one more, and then we'll save the Charlie's top 5 for another episode. So your number 5 is crested ibis, which is
was it?
It's sometimes
I thought it was
right?
I thought it was Royal St. Claudius.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so it's number 6.
Yeah, you gave my number 5 away. You
Oh man, total next episode. So yeah, your number 6, which is the 5th in sequence, starting at 10, is Royal St. Claudius. This one surprised me a little bit because it's not a particularly spectacular bird, but I know it's super rare and it's in some pretty cool puna habitat, right?
Yeah, this sort of very high elevation forest of polylepis is one of my favorite. Polylepis. It's these little gnarled. They look like overgrown bonsai trees. They're just these gnarled little low trees right just below the tree line. And you get them in little patches, and there's a whole bunch of. Did you bird the polylepis?
Yeah. I've birded lots of polylepis, but I didn't realize that bird was.
No, it's a polylepis bird, and it's critically endangered. I love critically endangered birds. It's just like the holy grail of birds, to see one of these, which are the most threatened species in the world. And there was, I don't know how many are thought to be there, 200-300, something like that. And the polylepis is really, it's a really threatened habitat. It's great wood for making fires, and the people that live up in the Andes, they use wood for cooking on, for cooking hot water, for staying alive. It's right there. And they take
I've spent some very cold nights at like 13,000 feet in the Andes, and I've always understood why people burn polylepis, because you're absolutely freezing. And as conservation-minded as you might be, a warm fire is a good thing to have.
You're not allowed to make some nice hot tea and keep yourself warm and cook something for your family. And the Andean people there, the Quechua people, they've always done it, but it creates a problem, with these restricted species that rely on that habitat. So it's a real conservation problem. But luckily, there's conservation groups working on it and doing replanting and stuff like that, and environmental education. One really nice project was they were going around giving firewood to local people so they didn't have to chop down the trees. So, and it's just such a simple thing. I think they gave them like eucalyptus trees that had grown quickly, and they just drop them off on the roadside near these people. So to remove the need for chopping down this, and they're incredibly slow growing, these trees as well. So I was up there. Yeah, this was sort of around Cusco, Sacred Valley, that kind of area, Ollantaytambo, sort of in a similar area to Machu Picchu, or Machu Picchu as they call it. And there was one famous site called I can't remember the name now. Abracadabra, yeah, something like that. And there was one place that was the place to see it, and it was quite close to a road. And the way you could do it is you would sort of get off on the road and hike over a little bit of a mountain, then down into this hidden valley. And then you would walk all the way down, and you'd come down like 10 kilometers further down the road. You'd spit back on the road. So you basically had to do this long, high altitude hike. And I'd done this twice. And most people have a driver that drops them off and waits for them. But I was trying to time it with public buses that went like twice a day. So I'd get dropped off in a bus, and then I'd go up, and I'd try and get down there by the time the last bus was going back down. And this was like way up, freezing cold in the Andes. And if you miss that bus, it's not good. So, and I'd done that twice, and I missed this bird. And I met this guy who worked at this conservation organization called ECOAN, who do fantastic work in conservation for these Andean species. And he gave me a good location, but he said it's not easy. And instead of hiking up a little bit and hiking down, I actually had to hike up from 2,600 meters. You can tell me that in feet. What is it? 8,000 feet, something like that. Up to 4,000 meters. So a 1,400 meter climb.
Oh, yeah. So it's like 5,000 feet elevation gain.
Yeah. And there's that gain at high elevation, where it's thin air, carrying all your stuff, all your food, camping gear for 4 nights.
Hope you have a lot of coca.
Yeah, I did a little bit of coca in my mouth. And I did this. I was pretty fit at the time. I mean, I was used to the altitude as well. I've been birding 3,000 meters the whole time, whatever. And I did this climb with all my food, bread, cheese, soup, a little camping stove. The nice thing up there is that you don't really have to carry your water, because the streams are crystal clear. Yeah. And just drinking that water, it's the most delicious water you'll ever drink. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I climbed up there, and I hiked in this little valley. There was one little house. It was like a little farmer who had these little llamas, or I guess maybe what are they called? Alpacas. He had his little alpacas there, and I was like, ve las aves, and he's adelante, and I think I gave him a bottle of Coke and some chocolate or something like that, which he was quite happy with. And and I spent days walking around all these little patches in this little hidden valley. I was probably up there for 4 nights at 4,000 meters elevation, freezing in my tent at night. You would wake up and you'd open your tent, and the ground would be frozen. And me being a bit of a cheapskate from Yorkshire, I didn't. It wasn't like I had all the best camping gear. It was like some little thin, some little thin cheap sleeping bag and a fleece. And what I would do at night, I brought some candles and some matches, and I would light a candle, and I would sort of sit around my candle in my tent, sort of keeping warm. And long nights, long cold nights, and I would sort of
12 hours.
I would read my book at night, like by candlelight, sort of shivering and sort of trying to warm up on my candle. It was just an amazing experience, and I had tried so hard. I had spent days looking for this thing, and I was going round and round and round and round. And even once you were up there, you were hiking even further up and down all day long, and you just felt like you were burning. You were sort of like almost run out of fuel in a car. You were sort of driving on fumes. And you had that idea. your body just needed more, and then you'd eat a chocolate biscuit or something like that, and you'd feel this energy just flowing through your body. And it would get to sort of 8 or 9 a.m. and the warm sunshine, you'd sort of lay there like a lizard, sort of warming up.
Yep.
and then I found this brown bird, this sort of long brown bird with a thick bill, hopping around, feeding in the moss, just in the polylepis. And it was just magical. It was just like I almost collapsed with exhaustion, of like emotional exhaustion, because you hold that tension inside yourself. I've got to really want to see this, really want to see this bird, and you see it, and then it just kind of drains from you, and then everything, you almost feel like crying because how much effort you've put in to see this bird, and then you just spent, absolutely spent, and you're done. And it's just one of the biggest senses of achievement I've felt in my life, I think, was seeing this little medium-sized brown bird.
Brown bird.
Yeah. So that's it. Yeah, that's my number 5. So I feel exhausted just telling you about it because it brings back all that.
Yeah. I gotta say, hearing this story just makes me wish I could go birding, seriously
I know
right now.
I've birded a lot with Ken, Africa and Madagascar and Asia, and he's often said, I really want to go to Peru. He just feels this, I know you feel this desire to get there, and it's just, you can bird it. You can bird it.
Yeah, specifically Peru.
Yeah, and it would suit you down to the ground. You could just head for the hills. You see a mountain, see some forest, you just hike up with some food and just explore. No one's going to tell you you're not going to go there. I had one. It's
so different.
Yeah.
A lot of Africa, there's this mentality of like, if foreign people want to see anything, they have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of understandable, and maybe it's healthy in some ways, but it leaves you feeling less free. In South America, you feel very free.
I think so, and it's just it's a feeling of freedom, and the sense of not having to get back to your hotel and stuff like that. You've got a tent, you can get food, go up for as long as
you're good.
Yeah.
As long as you don't die of hypothermia, you're fine.
Yeah, you'd be great.
So this story very much reminds me, I did an epic quest for Stygian owl in Bolivia.
Oh, right.
Very similar place, up at like 15,000 feet.
Yeah.
Absolutely frigid, spending days just freezing, walking around for an hour and then coming back trembling and just getting in my sleeping bag for 3 hours to warm up and then have a little chocolate and go out birding again. But I actually didn't see the Stygian owl, so the whole thing was a failure in terms
of
see it. Yeah, bird market. So that won't be on my top 10.
So you haven't seen it at all? That's it. That'll be on your nemesis list, I guess.
Never. Yeah, that could be a good podcast.
That's another podcast.
Nemesis. Yeah. Could be frustrating, but it's a good story. I'm gripped by the Synclodes, and I'm also just gripped by wishing I could be out birding somewhere right now. For historical context, we're recording this during the pandemic lockdown, so I have sort of hardly left my house for 4 months. Charlie, I think you move around a little bit.
I get out quite a bit birding with my son, but it's still, I mean, what I would give to just go and fly to the Andes right now and just explore, it's it's a dream.
Indeed. So next episode will be Charlie's top 5 lifetime.
Stay tuned.
Anticipation is already building among our fanatical fans.
It is.
Maybe by episode 2 we will have come up with a name for this podcast or whatever it is.
Let's see. I'm also pretty excited to hear yours in a while, but hopefully we'll.
I have to come up with them.
It's actually fun. It's actually a fun thing to do, to think about your top bird. It's actually not really birds. It's birding experiences.
Absolutely. Like that, the Synclodes, it's really not about the bird itself.
Yeah.
If that bird was common in a habitat that was easy to access, the experience wouldn't have been that special.
No.
That's something a lot of people don't get about birding, is to what degree that's true of so many things.
When I was putting together this list, there was a few things in common that I was noticing. One was, it was usually the amount of effort I put in to see the bird was a big factor.
Yeah.
And often it was how long I'd been doing it, how many times I'd been missing it. You know, sometimes some of them were years. In my top 5, we'll get to some species that I spent years and I only saw them 20 years later. You know, and it's that's also a big thing. And rarity. I'm just crazy about rarity. And
I think I'll probably include mammals in my top 10. Although
I was thinking of doing that, but then I'm thinking, you know, that would also be another different podcast as well.
That could be a whole other
pretty epic mammal stories too.
I was also thinking when you were talking about the spatula tail that some of these things have become so much easier to see these days, which is great when you're on a bird tour and you have one day and you want to see the spatula tail. But it is different than, you know, backpacking into some area that's unknown and not knowing whether or not you're going to see a given bird. It's a very different experience. So it's much more accessible for people, which is probably a good thing from a conservation standpoint. Yeah. But you lose something as well.
Certainly. I mean, you could struggle to see things on tours and you can endure a certain amount of hardship, but sort of fairly young, fit birders, hardship by their standards, it's next level, eh? I mean, it's like, you know, that's
some of the stuff that I did, like in my 20s. You know, I'm truly lucky to be alive right now, and I guess if we keep doing this podcast, I'm sure we both have a lot of stories like that.
Yeah, I'm starting to think, you know, could I still do this? You know, there's some of these things I probably might not even, you know, this was in my 20s or, you know, early 30s, and now I'm 45 and starting to notice certain limitations.
Yeah, that high elevation stuff in the Andes, I mean, it is unbelievably intense. When I was like in peak shape and acclimated and still had some close calls in Bolivia. So, yeah.
I love high elevation, eh? That breathless feeling and that clear, thin mountain air and the cool temperatures. It just does it for me, eh? It really does.
Me too. Yeah, the air that kind of like hits you in the chest, it like stabs you when you breathe it in. It's great.
And anything you eat up there tastes good.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that was our Tanzania trip. Man, didn't matter what it was.
It was
just tasted absolutely fantastic.
Okay.
Cool. We'll do it again soon.
We will.
Charlie.
Thanks for listening. It's been fun.
To all of our. Yeah, indeed. Makes me want to go
to the next one.